the last part of the factory integration is the sound system. So like I said, they're feeding a high level signal to the factory amp, but they are feeding a signal to all 6 channels, so you will not lose any of your speakers. So when you install an aftermarket radio in this vehicle, a lot of times people ask, oh, can we retain all our speakers? And 9 out of 10 times I tell that person no. And there is a way to, but it doesn't make sense to do it. So with this radio, they leverage the internal DSP to generate 6 channels of output, which are mixed channels. It's not true 6-channel output, but we'll cover that later on. So they send a signal to all these speakers. They cross the front 2 speakers to produce the center channel, and you can do the same. But your aftermarket radio is going to have 6 outputs for your RCAs, which is what I recommend you use to power your factory amp. So those 6 RCAs are going to be front left, front right, rear left, rear right, and then subwoofer, and sometimes subwoofer 2. Most of the times you get 2 subs. There is no center channel output. This car, when it was designed, the CD player in the vehicle was meant to play this surround sound type CD. I forget what the CD was called or the format was called. It was like a movie format. It was supposed to catch on. It was supposed to be the next big thing of high quality audio, but it never caught on. There was a few albums that got released in that format, and if you put it into the factory player and listen to it, it sounds beautiful. But that's why they built the system the way they did, because they figured this is going to be the next big thing. We should include this in our car, and it turned out that didn't to be the case. So car audio kept moving and never adopted that 5th channel, even though other cars do it now. Other cars have multi-channel speaker systems where it's 8 channels, 10 channels. Your traditional aftermarket radio is going to have a pair of fronts, a pair of rears, and that subwoofer output. If you add a amplifier to the mix, you can, generate that center channel, so to say, but no aftermarket radio is going to generate a center channel for you. Now, for all the people that have asked me and I've told them no, here's how you can do it. The way to do it is you're going to have 2 RCAs, one for your front left, one for your front right. You're going to take your RCA, you're going to put a splitter. So now your 1 RCA becomes 2 RCAs, and your other 1 RCA becomes 2 RCAs. Then you take that and you connect one of those 2 RCAs that you now have extra to the back of the radio, and you take the other extra 2 that you have and you put it to a Y connector that goes 2 to 1, and you plug that in to you feed that signal to the center channel signal of the radio. Now I know that sounded hella confusing, but to the people that understood it, or to the people that want to understand, there will be another follow-up video that I will make kind of explaining it. You're going to need 3 Y adapters, 2 that are going to be 1 to 2, and then 1 that's going to be 2 to 1. And then once you start hooking it up, you'll see what I mean. But that's the way to do it. You're generating a fake center channel by crossing the front left and front right speakers to one signal. I don't recommend it. There's no need for it. Extra expense for a channel that can only handle up to 10 watts off the factory. It just doesn't make sense. But for those people who really want to do it, that's the way to do it. This radio, they're leveraging that DSP to generate 6 channels of output, so you get to keep all your speakers, including your subwoofer, and they actually buff the subwoofer some, so the factory signal to the sub is relatively low. This radio does a pretty good job of sending a high level signal to the amp, so at the right volume it'll actually sound decently loud compared to the factory radio. But after a certain threshold, probably like 28 I would say on the volume, it's going to start to distort and not sound so well. The last piece of this factory integration is going to be the steering wheel controls. So you can map the steering wheel controls to do whatever you want. Again, these controls aren't going to do anything for you. They're still going to function with the factory unit. But these you can kind of leverage to whatever you want. I have them programmed for the standard features of what they're supposed to do. Volume up and down, channel up and down in mode. But you can reprogram them to do what you want. If you install this radio, one of the things you will lose, part of that factory integration, is the XM functionality. So the XM connection does not connect to this radio. If you want to use XM, you're going to have to leverage some sort of internet connection to power the XM app. So you can download the XM app from the Play Store and then use internet to run that app, or you can run the app on your phone and then stream it over Bluetooth. But there is no native XM interface for this radio. So you can't leverage the antenna in the car or the receiver in the car. You have to use it via Wi-Fi, via Bluetooth, or another method of connectivity to get XM. Alright, so then the last thing on factory integration that this allows you to add if you don't have is a factory backup camera. So I'll show you the one I purchased. I'll show you how it looks like on the screen. But that's another big thing that if you're going to install this, you can finally add, because with the factory radio, installing with the factory navigation system, if you have a 2004 2006, it's a little tricky to add a factory backup camera. I mean, it's a little tricky to add a backup camera to the factory system. It can be done, but it's kind of hard to do, or I would say a little more expensive than you would like for it to be. So with this system, you can add a cheap backup camera relatively inexpensively, and the installation is pretty straightforward. Alright guys, so here are the two extra accessories I bought. One of them is the backup camera, and that's what I want to show to you. So the backup camera is supposed to go in place of one of the brake light bulbs, and it has LEDs, so it will mimic a brake light, and then it's supposed to be very easy to install. So I will show you what that actually looks like on the screen. And here's the manual for it. It's very generic camera. I mean, it's nothing really special. It just made sense to buy because it is advertised as fitting with the vehicle, and we will confirm that in just a little bit. Now, the other thing I did purchase was this Carplay adapter, or at least that's how it was marketed to me, as a Carplay adapter. And here you can see it says USB adapter kit, and it's supposed to work with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. I have heard that this radio is supposed to work with Android Auto without any adapters, just a certain app. I did test it. I didn't have the best results, but we will explore that later on. I will show that to you. I just wanted to get these two out of the way to make sure I mentioned them and didn't forget them. So this radio, so the DSP is a digital signal processor, and basically all that means is it takes the signal generated by your music and allows you to process it in a way that would make sense for your speakers, so that your lows get so that your subwoofers get the lows that they want, so your tweeters get the highs that they want, and everything in between. So all that's supposed to make sense. A DSP is supposed to help you straighten all that out. Radios have equalizers, which is kind of similar to a DSP, but a DSP has more features. So the DSP built into this radio, I could not find the model number or what chip was used. I didn't go far enough in my disassembly to also look at the actual PCB board and look at the model number on the chip. It probably would have been scratched out anyways. But you have 9 equalizers off the bat, 9 preset equalizer profiles that you can choose from, and they manipulate your frequencies as expected. Then you have the ability to kind of pick where you want to have the audio mostly come from. Then you have a feature that's mostly found in newer radios, which I believe this is what it's trying to mimic, some sort of time alignment, where you're going to measure the distance between a speaker and your ear and help you center your soundstage. I didn't really get much into these settings. I kind of couldn't really understand what was going on and didn't look far enough to really seek help or figure it out. Then the last thing are some bass enhancements and bass filters, so you can set if you want to improve certain hertz to kind of give yourself more deep bass or mimic kind of like a bass boost or something like that. But something that kind of they missed, or maybe this was on purpose, I'm not sure I understand it. Normally a DSP is an external device, so it's kind of like a mini amp. Looks like it's not a mini amp, but it kind of looks like one. It'll have some RCA ins, RCA outs, and a ton of knobs to mess with, or sometimes you can only interface them through software or Bluetooth, whatever the case tends to be. But often is an external chip or an external unit, and then it talks to your radio via those RCA cables. It receives the sound signal, etc. This DSP is part of the radio, so they may not be on the same exact PCB board, but from my educated guess, they are close enough but not directly attached. So the DSP actually generates a signal out to via two RCA cables. So if you go back to our original impressions video, you'll see that the two RCAs that I disconnect, I'm like, whoa, I have no sound. That's actually the DSP's audio out into the radio's audio in. Then the internal radio uses its internal amplifier, which I'm not sure what the chip is. Then the radio uses that DSP signal through its internal amplifier and sends out 6 channels of output to your factory amp. So those 6 channels aren't true 6 channels. It's really front left, front right, rear left, rear right. Then your front left and your front right are crossed to make your center channel, and your rear left and your rear right are crossed to make your subwoofer. Which kind of worries me, because if they're crossing those rear channels, there is no high pass filter on your subwoofer, so it could be getting higher signals than it's supposed to. But again, I haven't looked far enough to see. I assume not, but I haven't looked far enough to see. The DSP doesn't have rear left, rear right, sub 1, sub 2 outs. I looked at a schematic, which I believe is very similar to this radio, all the other pins matched up, and I added pins to the harness that comes with this radio with the RCA outs, hoping that the signal was there, but that they had just not pinned it because they didn't fully understand how to integrate with the factory vehicle. They didn't fully understand how to integrate with the factory amplifier. So I figured, oh, they just left them out. They figured they didn't need it. After adding them and testing them, there's actually no sound coming out of them. So that was a little more worrisome, because I'm like, great, so even if I wanted to bypass their factory radio and leverage this DSP and all the features of it, I can't, because I'm only limited to the front left and front right audio outputs from their DSP. I'm not sure why they did that. I'd like to figure out why and get them to enable the other outputs if it's through software, however it can be done, because that would be very useful. That means that then we could leverage the DSP's audio out straight to our factory amplifiers and really tune the system how we wanted it to, instead of leveraging the amplifier inside of the radio, because it's going to be a lower class amplifier anyways. So I would be all for bypassing it altogether, but it's not something that you can do right now. And again, this is all my speculation, a very educated guess, because I don't have an exact schematic of this radio, so I'm going by what I was able to infer from the information I was able to gather in the testing that I did. And I'll show you the harnesses later on. I obviously am still showing you the demo of the radio, so I can't take everything apart and show you that. But I am going to be taking this radio after I finish this review, so I will show you kind of the pieces that I'm talking about now, and you can get a better idea of what I'm talking about. So back to the equalizer sound quality of this radio. So back to what I was saying. So with the DSP, now you can't run a subwoofer. So the factory radio, most people tap into the sub line out, then they use line out converter and go to their sub. Some don't even use a line out converter because it's not needed. If you're going before the amp, you have a low level signal, you can send that straight to an amp. You might just want to boost it, but that's neither here or there. With this radio, you will still need a line out converter. Or some sort of splitter from that DSP out to your subwoofer, and then a high pass filter on your subwoofer. So it makes it a little trickier than an aftermarket radio normally would for your subwoofer, because an aftermarket radio already comes with the sub out 1 and 2 most of the time, and then very specific settings around the sub. If you want it on and on, if you want it on and off, if you want it in phase, out of phase, and other settings relative to that subwoofer that are not going to be natively found in this radio, because it's not a feature that it supports off the bat. And that I have confirmation from Navitech. I'll show you the messages where they said that this unit does not support an aftermarket subwoofer. While you still can add it, it doesn't have native support, and I think that's a big thing, because when you go aftermarket, you look for all the different things that you can add to your radio, and to be limited at such a high price point just doesn't make sense to me. But again, it's just where we are with this radio. The reason why I bring up that aftermarket sub situation is because a lot of our customers often ask if they can install aftermarket subwoofers with our products, and yes, you can. Harnesses allow for you to use the subwoofer outputs of the aftermarket radio for the purpose that you want. And using a splitter, you can keep your factory sub and then also run a signal out to your aftermarket sub. You can tap our wire harness for the remote turn on that you need, and the installation is pretty straightforward for those subs. It's a big feature that people want, and that's why I'm mentioning it. Even though you might not have aftermarket subs in your car, just realize that the marketplace really calls for them and people really use them. So that's, I think, something they missed here with their factory integration. I think that's a market they missed here, because it's something that could be easily added and it would prove a lot of benefit to their customer base, because most people who are going to look at something like this might already have aftermarket subwoofers, or might be thinking about it because they're like, I'm going to replace the radio. I want the car to sound good, but I also want more bass. And most of the time, more bass is going to equal, aftermarket subs. All right, so now let's talk about sound quality. So like I mentioned earlier, we have a DSP feeding the internal amp of this radio. Then this amp is taking that radio, converting to a high signal, to a high level signal meant for speakers, and that signal is now hitting your amp. So now your amp's grabbing that high level signal and amplifying it again. So you are going to have a louder radio, and you're going to be very happy about that. You're going to be like, yeah, my radio is so much louder, the bass hits harder, I love this. For maybe about a month, 2 months, when you realize that you're ruining your speakers and your factory amplifier. Now, the reason why I say that is because here we'll go to a simple radio station. So right now we're at volume 7. Between levels, it's something that I would actually listen to music at. Maybe between level 8 and level 25, 26 is where you can comfortably listen to music. And 26 is going to be much louder than what your factory radio was before. But what happens after 26, your max volumes, this will begin to distort. And let me show you.
This is Justin to Long Island's #1 for all the hits all summer on 106.1.
And now, before people chalk it up to it's the equalizer, the setting I have on my DSP, whatever they may think it is, I have my DSP set to, so before anyone thinks that's the way I've tuned the radio or what I've done to the radio, I have all my settings flatlined. So everything, this is in the middle, this is set to nothing, this is all set to 0, this is all set to 0. So at those with those settings, your radio is going to distort. There's nothing you can do about it. It's a high level signal, then being double amplified. It's just what is going to happen. Now, if you don't listen to music that loud, not a problem for you. If you can keep your music range between volume 7 and volume 30, you should be able to get the most out of this radio. But do know that distortion does exist. You are doing damage to your factory amp and your factory speakers this way. And the more you listen to music at max volume, the more damage you're doing. It's just, it is what it is. You can replace your speakers, try to get around it. I think your best solution is, if you're going to use this radio and don't want to ruin your sound system within your vehicle, is to take the factory amp and bypass it. We sell a bypass harness that will work just for the we sell a bypass harness that will work just for this occasion, so you can just completely bypass the amp and run all the signal from the radio straight to all the speakers, and then you are doing a lot less damage. Then it's just about toning the frequencies that are going to each speaker to make sure that you're not sending low level signals to your tweeters and high level signals to your sub. But that's pretty easy to figure out and eliminate. That's pretty easy to figure out and eliminate, and make sure your system works the way you intend it to. Audio quality within those volume ranges is awesome. Your sub hits harder than it used to. Your speakers are louder than they were before. And I think even your highs just have more of a sound stage to them. I think you just overall sound improves. But then after that point, it distorts and it's doing damage to your speakers. It's something you don't want. Along with that issue, you have another issue. That's the constant popping when switching from stereo signals. So right now, I am on the radio. I'm now going to switch to YouTube Music. There goes the pop. I'm going to switch back now to Bluetooth audio. There's my nice pop. I'm going to actually switch from Bluetooth calling to Bluetooth streaming. There goes my nice pop. Now that is not really me being nitpicky, because it's something very annoying and no other radio does that. There's no other radio that's going to give you a bop when you switch sources. It's just something within the settings of this, something within the configuration of the internals of the amp matched with DSP that's causing that pop. And then also another weird one, along with that popping, another weird pop is when you go from volume 1 to volume 0, the amp like shuts itself off or makes that popping noise again. So that's very strange. And then there is a low hissing at low volumes that you don't hear often, but you will notice it, and they mentioned that in their marketing material. So again, that's just another kind of sound quality issue that you have to deal with. So all those things kind of put it in the no category for me as a radio. As a tablet, it's great. As an overall unit for what it is, it's pretty awesome. But when it comes to sound quality and you kind of treating this as an aftermarket radio that competes with, you know, an Alpine, a high-end Pioneer, a high-end Kenwood, those things kind of put it out of the competition, because those other radios don't have these issues. Maybe older models or lower end models, but something at the $500 price point, like an AVIC 4400 NEX, that's going to have a full equalizer inside of it, and navigation, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, all the features that this will have. Just the screen is smaller, but it's not going to have these annoying little things where at max volume it distorts because of the way it's generating signal. I mean, it depends on how you install it, but I'm just saying it has more versatility than this radio, and kind of puts it in a position where I wouldn't recommend it because of those issues that it currently has. Now that pop thing, it's only going to affect you if you're constantly listening to multiple sources. If you're always listening to Bluetooth audio, you're never going to hear it, because you're never going to switch from Bluetooth audio. So again, for a very specific user, some of these issues will never arise because they won't trigger them. But for other issues, maybe someone like me who has a little more knowledge of the car audio world, so you're going to mess with different things, you're going to try to set different things separately, you are going to run into a couple more issues than a regular user who's just going to go nav, Bluetooth audio, home. You know, they're not going to run into as many issues, and they don't blast their music, they play it at relatively low volumes. They're going to think this radio is out of this world, that it has no issues whatsoever. Let me kind of take a step back, and I've talked about a lot of the negatives, so I don't want to make this seem like a negative review of this radio, because these issues you can kind of, you know, look to the side to, not really worry about in certain cases, and overcome overall. There's nothing here that's going to completely stop you from using this radio or make it completely unusable, you know, unless you blow an amp or you blow one of the speakers. But that's just a disaster waiting to happen. There's really nothing you can do about that. Now that we covered the audio bugs and audio kind of, you know, problems, I want to showcase some of the apps. So I want to show you some of the good stuff. So I'm going to show you some of the apps that are pretty popular that most people would want to see here on the radio. So I'm going to walk you kind of through some of the most used apps that people will want to see. But first I'm going to get rid of these launchers. So I'm going to keep the factory launcher. Drag your apps around here, like kind of how you would on your phone, where you can put them all on one screen, or if you want, you can, you know, make folders by stacking them on top of each other, kind of the native Android features that you'd expect. So I'm going to walk you through some of the apps that most people are going to want to install. So the first one's going to be Google Maps, and you can download that right off the Play Store. And you're going to open it up, and you'll see that Google Maps actually leverages the entire screen of the radio. So this is very nice. The only thing is that the whites, because of the angle you're at, are kind of hard to see. So the outline for the bar of the where you would type in a location is hard, and then all white on that is hard to see. So I don't know how well the camera's picking it up, but in person, because of the angle, it's hard to see where certain borders are compared to other stuff. But here you can, you know, just like your regular phone, you can look, you can explore, things like that. It's very it works very well. It reacts to the screen size, and the overlay of the Android skin works well because it actually turns transparent, so you always have your climate controls, which actually overlay on top of the app, so the app isn't going to resize whenever you use these. It's going to keep, come on, it's going to keep that same size that it started off with. All right, so now that we did Google Maps, let's go to Waze, because that's another very important one. So again, Waze is another one that's going to leverage the entire screen and look very nice on the 9.7 inch. So again, here we are. You know, you can do what you need to. It looks very good. You can access the regular native settings that you would within your phone. It all works very well. Just how you can access all the native settings. Waze works the way you expect it to. There are no kinks or weird little issues. It works the way it's supposed to. So after Waze, we're going to move forward to Pandora. Pandora is another app that's going to look very good on this display and work the way it's supposed to. So I don't have Pandora Premium or anything like that. So here's kind of the screen that you will get to interface with. And this is very similar to your phone. Just the only thing is these buttons are kind of small. I'm not sure if this Pandora app will give you a driving mode, kind of how, yeah, it doesn't look like it. It treats this radio as a tablet, so there are no specific features to make the buttons bigger or navigation easier or anything like that. So it's just treating it as a normal tablet. I'll show you Spotify. Both Pandora and Spotify don't really pick up that you're in a vehicle, kind of if you would on your phone. So they both give you the kind of native experience of the app. The interface like you were on a tablet, so you get, you know, the thumbnail and then smaller controls, kind of how you would on a regular tablet on a bigger phone. And then let me show you YouTube. YouTube will kind of react to the screen size as well and fill it up kind of like a tablet. So just give it a second, it's coming up. So here you can see you get kind of, you know, a regular YouTube view, and then you have, you know, your video player is going to be at the top there, then your information, and then, you know, they move the comments or whatever they did, but everything is still here the way you expected. And then if you actually go full screen, it turns black like that. So it realizes that it's not going to turn and go full screen. It's going to go full screen this way and get these black bars. And that's kind of the same thing other video apps do. There's no video app that really fills the screen unless it was filmed in a portrait mode and not a landscape mode. But most of the time you'll get a video like this. So let me show you what I mean. So if we look at, here we go, here's a portrait video. So when you turn it bigger, it uses, you know, the portrait. It can leverage the screen because it's in portrait mode. But again, it's not filling the screen because the aspect ratio is off. But there are videos that can leverage the entire space of the screen depending on how they're filmed. Alright, so after YouTube, we're going to move on to YouTube Music. which is just YouTube, but again, I'll show it to you guys. So here's YouTube Music, and it kind of looks like YouTube, and the player is the same. It kind of fills more of the screen where the the thumbnail is bigger and the controls are a little bigger, but it's very similar to your other audio apps that work the same. And now we're gonna look at some Obd2 apps that have been requested. So let me show you guys kind of how those will look. So we have an app that I'm not very familiar with, but it's called Dash Commander. And then after this, I want to get into the native video player that the unit has. This is the video that comes on the radio. Please don't assume that I downloaded that video. Then it has an audio player as well, if I could find it. Music player. So it has a standard music player that you can use. Again, this is music that's preloaded on it. You can load your music and then load this and then use this music player to play that music without another app. But here, let's see if those apps downloaded now. So while those download, I'll take a second and show you what Instagram looks like here. So yeah, guys, here's what Instagram looks on here. And I'll use this to give us a plug. So make sure you're following us on Instagram, like that. So let me go back to those other apps that were asked of us. So here we go. Here's kind of what Dash Command will look like. You can get into gauges, other things like that. Here's what you're looking at. Now, again, I don't have any live information to show you, but I just wanted to show this for the person in the comments of our first impressions video that asked that we kind of show this for them. As you can see, it kind of fills the whole screen. This Dash Command does look a little dated, but it is what it is. It will provide you with the information you're looking for and allow you to interface with the app. Now that was Dash Command. Let's look at Torque Lite. I assume it's going to be very similar. It looks like we are... So all the apps are kind of, a little different. You might experience some bugs that I didn't, but overall they all work. They all kind of react to this radio as if it's a tablet. They do sometimes crash for no reason. So I did have Google Maps crash on me a couple times for no reason. YouTube and YouTube Music all have crashed for no reason. And it would just exit out. I'd be going on Google Maps, going somewhere, and it would just... the app would crash and kick me out. But you can easily enough just open them again and get back to what you were doing. But I did want to mention that. So this is the app that comes with the car. Deny, don't ask again. So now it looks like it's gonna start doing what it needs to connect me. So there it goes. So now I'm mirroring my screen. And it looks like it's mirroring my entire screen. So if I play a YouTube video, it will play the entire... What if I go full screen? So yeah, so then that shape, that's not what the video looks on my phone, but it shaped it to what it's expected. So that's easy con. So that's not what that's not Apple, that's not Android Auto. This is just mirroring your phone. It can be done. This isn't what I was going for. So I'm going to uninstall this app. Hopefully it doesn't have crazy long-lasting effects. That was Easy Connection. That's one of the apps that comes native with it. So that Easy Con comes with the radio. I guess that's going to be your mirroring. Now we're going to go with another app. This is the Z-Link app. Yeah, so this is a Z-Link. Again, not activated, not sure why it's not activated, have not reached out to Navitech to figure out more. Now I'm going to show you the app that I had to download that this adapter said to download, and that's going to be this AutoKit app. So this AutoKit app is going to want it to be plugged in. It'll recognize the product. Then it's going to ask me to connect my phone. Alright guys, so now let me show you Android Auto and Apple CarPlay.